Sir, whenever we talk about heritage of India and ancient heritage of India, we talk about Sindhu Sanskriti, Harappan Sanskriti, and we tend to forget the Paleolithic history, which is foundation of Harappan Sanskriti and other cultures, whatever we found in India. So you are working since 50 years in this field. So what would your challenges and opportunities for the further work, and what do you think this heritage, Paleolithic heritage of India should we look at?
Yes, it is actually an unfortunate situation that most archaeologists in northern universities and also Western Indian universities, they are focusing their attention on Harappan sites for fast growth of their career. And there are numerous Harappan sites, and not many sites are contributing to new knowledge, and they are going back to the sites which were previously excavated, and new methodologies are being added and employed and all that. No doubt there is some excitement in working on Harappan cities, but that is not the only archaeology that we should all be involved in. And we have such great Paleolithic heritage equivalent to what has been found in Africa. In fact, Europe doesn't have that high antiquity of early Paleolithic sites, whereas in India we have such number of sites. In the last 20-25 years, dating of these Paleolithic sites has contributed to establishing a temporal framework, and then make an impact on archaeologists working in different parts of the world, especially in Europe and America, where they do a lot of these global synthesis. India does not find adequate place in their books. So, but the recent dating of Lower Paleolithic to 1.5 million years at Athirumpakkam, and again at Isampur 1.2 million years, and then similar sites which are in the range of 800 to 900,000 years have really contributed to the importance of India as a geographical crossroads for expanding the hominins outside of Africa. And not only that, we have very good dates for the Lower Paleolithic in India. And the last 10 years, or even in the last 15 to 16 years, beginning with the dating of Middle Paleolithic at Jwalapuram in Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh, and then similar dates for the Middle Paleolithic at Athirumpakkam, and also new sites in the Prakasam district of Andhra Pradesh. There we have very good contexts which have been dated to nearly 300,000 years back in time, while Athirumpakkam is given a date of nearly 4 lakh years ago for the Middle Paleolithic. The Andhra Pradesh sites have given a time range from 3 lakh years to 1 lakh year and things like that. And then in addition to that, we also have Upper Paleolithic now very well defined in terms of early microliths, that have been found in stratigraphical context. Way back in 1980s, S.S. Hali of the Archaeological Survey of India was the first person to date microliths to 25 to 28,000 years, but that was left as an isolated evidence. But the last 20-25 years, sites like Jwalapuram, Hethakedi, and Mahadebbara in West Bengal, and even some of these surface sites also look as old as 40 to 50,000 years. So this is an interesting development because when you write a history of mankind, we have to address these basic questions, and amongst these basic questions like who, when, where, what, when also has greater importance, then only history can be reconstructed in a chronological manner. And these dates have contributed to a sequence of dates, and also for the first time we have a temporal framework for Lower, Middle and Upper Paleolithic. And for Mesolithic, we knew large number of sites, and most of those Mesolithic sites which were excavated in the 70s and 80s, they were characterized by rock shelters like the Bhimbetka rock shelter, for example, and where they found human remains as well as microliths and so on. And then the notion that microliths were made by Mesolithic people restricted investigations into these rock shelter sites that could be even older, or that these rock shelters were occupied much earlier than the Mesolithic period and so on. So that is where I think that there is equal amount of excitement, because in some sites like Bhimbetka, where Wakankar excavated in 1970s, he found a couple of burials with human remains, and he mentioned that these are all fossils, and he gave the name Bhimbetkiensis, Homo Bhimbetkiensis. But then that was again not well published by the author himself, and it was not well received by the archaeological community in the 1970s and 80s. But now with the onset of ancient DNA studies and the potential of these methods that are being employed to extract DNA from fossil bones, as well as the soils associated with prehistoric burials and so on, has enlivened the scope for investigating rock shelters and also extracting DNA. It's not only the Harappan sites which give us scope for extracting DNA, even though it has been extracted from rocky gadi and all, the evidence is very, very meager. But now we know that these rock shelters like Bhimbetka and Jwalapuram and so on, there are some human remains which have potential for extracting DNA. And as recently as 5 months ago, we went back to Bhimbetka and extracted, collected samples from those rock shelters which were excavated by Wakankar. So these are exciting opportunities that are there, and one should not think that Paleolithic archaeology is very drab and is frustrating because we only get only stone tools and so on. But if the well-known sites, which we consider them as iconic sites in India, are reinvestigated by employing modern methods, I think that we can give a much more interesting picture of Paleolithic population of this Indian subcontinent. And when it comes to Harappan civilization, it does not go beyond 5,000 years ago, and that is a very, very short history of our Indian prehistoric period. But if we can begin from Lower Paleolithic and identify similar sites across peninsular India, we will have greater opportunities to compete with the findings that are being made in Europe or China or in Africa, and then show the world that Indian archaeological sites or Paleolithic sites are much more potential than they were thought to be.
Sir, are there any methods like beside the surveying and excavation,
Yeah.
like the art and the petroglyphs, geoglyphs we
Yeah.
are getting? Is this the new thing that we are getting in prehistoric time?
No, actually, rock art is known for a very, very long time, long before these European rock art sites were found. Carlyle had discovered the Marana Pahad painted rock shelters, and then they were associated with microliths. So microlith means Mesolithic, and then if the rock shelters with paintings have microliths, the paintings were also thought to be hunter-gatherer Mesolithic community, and of course there is a continuity from the Mesolithic and so on. But with the dating of Jwalapuram painted rock shelter, and then the dating of the rock art to late Pleistocene, there is adequate scope for establishing Upper Paleolithic art in India. May not be as old as we find them in Europe and elsewhere, but what we need to look back in all these sites is that we have new methods, and we can identify the stages or phases in the development of prehistoric rock art, whether it is painted rock shelters or whether it is Neolithic rock bruisings or megalithic rock bruisings, or the kind of geoglyphs that we are seeing here. They seem to have greater antiquity, and there is unfortunately the geoglyphs which are part of the lateritic landscape are not as yet being found suitable candidates for employing the available dating methods. So we need to look at the lateritic landscape and then find certain geochronological methods which also can help attack, because laterite is an impure material wherein we can there is no carbonate in these laterite at all, and it is all iron oxide and things like that. They are not suitable for uranium series dating and so on. And since they are exposed to surface, and if they were buried for some time, and if they were buried under surface, which the microbes which now we get in the vicinity of these rock shelter sites, we could now employ OSL dating method and so on. So right now we are excited about the presence of geoglyphs across a vast landscape along the west coast, and we need to look back because the exposed geoglyphs are only being identified and studied, but there may be more areas where they are not yet being noticed by the local people or the people who are going in search of these geoglyphs and so on. There may be one or two situations we may encounter in the near future, or we may have to wait for some time because luck always has to favor archaeologists. If we don't have luck with us, we are a failure as archaeologists. So what archaeologists need to be is to be lucky, and if we can come across any site where the geoglyphs are buried under some sediment of a meter, 1 meter kind of a sediment, because if partially the geoglyphs are exposed and the remaining part of the geoglyph is covered by a sediment, there is a scope for looking for a suitable method to date. So at least when these geoglyphs got buried, that we can say. If we cannot say when these geoglyphs were executed on the lateritic surface, so the minimum age is possible. See, like for a long time, until we found OSL dating method and AMS dating method, Middle Paleolithic used to be dated to some kind of a minimum age of 40,000 years, 50,000 years, and so on. So all those methods were giving us minimum ages because the context in which these artifacts were occurring. But now we are inland areas, we are finding many more sites, and possibility of finding a geoglyph site buried under some sediment is quite likely.
Sir, what do you think the advantages and challenges in the Paleolithic heritage to study the Paleolithic heritage of India?
The first and most foremost requirement now, as we look at the global scene about the Paleolithic studies, unlike in Africa and Europe and China, we have not been able to find human remains associated, whether it is Homo erectus or archaic Homo sapiens, or even Homo sapiens with the late Pleistocene microgliths and so on. So that is the most important demanding thing. But there are constraints. There some people argue that there are subsurface environment which matters. The way in which the human or animal bone is buried, and if the subsurface environment is not favorable for petrification, we lose the organic material. But then we have one example in the Narmada Valley where we have a cranial fossil, and if there is a situation where human cranium is fossilized and preserved in the alluvial sediment, it should also be possible for us to find human remains in more intact rock shelter context and so on. That is why we went back to Bhimbetka, where Dr. Wakankar had excavated a burial with human cranial remains associated with Middle Paleolithic. So that is why we prepared a multidisciplinary project involving paleoanthropologists, involving ancient DNA specialists, involving archaeologists like me, and identify those sites which have been well recognized all over the world. And you go back, and then if you have these sites preserving this kind of an evidence, if we can contribute with new methods, I think we are going to enhance the importance and significance of these rock shelters in the Vindhyan area and things like that. So that most important thing is we have hundreds of these early Paleolithic sites, Middle Paleolithic sites, and also now we know late Pleistocene microlithic sites and so on. But we have not yet come across well-preserved human fossil remains. So that should be the main target. But again, we don't know where they are. So that, for example, Athirumpakam was first investigated, discovered by Robert Brucewood and William King way back in 1880s. But the dating of that site was made only in 2012,
Yes,
2011.
Please tell us about that museum you have established and the experiment you are doing, popularizing prehistory.
Okay. So, I established that museum because, as you said in the beginning, I have nearly almost 50 years of experience of field archaeology, I collected lot of antiquities from a large number of sites, both during my PhD surveys as well as post-PhD research that I carried out. And I excavated a couple of sites like Sanganakalu Neolithic site, and then Cholapuram, Bilusargam caves in Andhra Pradesh. And so in all these sites, we had documented large number of antiquities, both biological and material. And I was working in a history department where archaeology had no priority. Even when it is taught to students, it was a subsidiary paper. And I, towards the end of my teaching career, I was teaching historical methods. So that kind of situation was very, frustrating to me. I said I did so much of prehistoric archaeology, even though I did not get proper place, in a archaeology department. Being part of a history department, I was able to do fieldwork and contribute towards understanding origins of humankind, earliest settlements in India, earliest Neolithic agricultural settlements in India, and all this was possible. But after my retirement, if I leave my antiquities in the department where I was working, and there is no successor, and my antiquities would have lost their meaning at all. Unfortunately for me, about 7-8 years before I was retiring, I was working at the Neolithic site of Sanganakalu, where large-scale mining activity was going on, and we realized that was the largest Neolithic site in peninsular India, and the site was getting destroyed, and that has the longest history of investigation. Like Athirampakam, same Foot was the first person to work there and identify the importance of the site, and then B. Subbarao, then Sankalya, then Jeddi Ansari, then K.C. Malhotra, then M.S. Nagaraj Rao, Rajguru, Majumdar, all of my teacher generation had done in various stages. They contributed to understanding that site, and I was sure we have not understood much about the Neolithic life phase as completely as possible. We knew so much about material culture, we didn't know what kind of agricultural crops they were cultivating. And at one point of time in 1997-96, I was in Cambridge on a fellowship, and the Cambridge University professor introduced me to one of his students who was working for his MPhil on origin of agricultural economies in southern India. And he introduced me, and then we discussed about looking back at many of these sites, go back, and then most Neolithic sites in Andhra Pradesh, western Andhra Pradesh, and northern Karnataka were subject to investigations by series of archaeological projects right from the time of Robert Bruce Foote. So we have sites, we have a lot of information. We did not have enough absolute chronological markers for various phases in the development of Neolithic. So we had a two-pronged approach. One was dating by employing AMS dating. Another was collect soils from habitation levels and process them in the lab for recovering food grains. So this, when we realized that many of these sites which are part of the granitic hills were now being subject to large scale mining, rampant mining, and we were going to lose vast majority of them. When Foote's time onwards, every 5-kilometer radius in the Rayalaseema, in the mid-southern Deccan, we have a Neolithic site, perched on top of these granitic hills. So if these were being, because of developmental activity, granite was a major source of raw material for road metal and other things. So we realized that we have such great sites, and if we lose them, and there will be nothing for the next generation to go back and apply modern methods and extract more information, which has not been possible today. So we had to start a campaign to stop mining activity, and it did not yield fruits immediately, but over a period of a couple of years, the local district authorities were impressed by our concern, and then they decided to support our idea of establishing a museum. The idea of establishing a museum was twofold. One, bring all antiquities that I have with me to the museum, prepare a catalog, and then make it available for anyone who wants to study. And this catalog preparation idea came to me because when Foote retired from the GSI and sold his antiquities to the Government Museum in Chennai, and he also prepared detailed catalogs, and these were the Bibles for us. In fact, after Professor Sankalya joined Deccan College, he was the one who thoroughly studied these reports published by the government museum and identify which are the areas to be identified for introducing students to go back and retrace these footsteps and contribute to the archaeology, understanding of the archaeology of these regions. And that is where Subbarao was given Bellary district, and prior to that he was trained by Wheeler at Brahmagiri, which is in the neighborhood of Bellary area only. And then several Nagaraj Rao was also similar situation. He surveyed Tungabhadra where food reported, and he discovered Tekkalukota. And because Subbarao was trained in Brahmagiri, he excavated Sanganakallu to find that sequence, culture history sequence and all that. So these researchers were, contributing to identifying more and more sites. That's why I say you walk from Sanganakallu in any direction, every 2 to 3 kilometers there is a hill, and on top of the hill either you have a stone axe factory or you have a small settlement or an ash mound, things like that. And the ash mounds are part and parcel of the Neolithic. They were first discovered by Colin Mackenzie, first excavated by Captain Newbold, and then first identified by Foote as Neolithic ash mounds. So such sites are numerous, and they are losing their context because of the rapid developmental activity. So I thought, yes, if this is the situation, let the museum serve two purposes. The catalog is going to help the next generation of students, the next 50 years or even more. And then we had recovered a lot of food crops which were cultivated by the Neolithic people through our work with the Cambridge scholars and so on. And then we had developed good chronology. And then, as I said, we excavated Jwalapuram. All that material was with us. So now in the last 5 years, 3 or 4 students have been working on the museum collection, and one has already obtained her PhD, and other people are working on our animal remains. Some are working on pottery, some are working on stone tools, some are working on grinding stones. All kinds of this facility I wanted to create, because as part of the university system I could not do this. But when I came out after my retirement, I had a standing of my own, and I could approach the district authorities and convince them that if you promote, this can be a center, and if you promote, this can be a center which can attract people coming from different walks of life, know more about the region's prehistory, not just history and so on. And so I had a concept of a school here, which I could not do as a teacher in the university. So when the museum was established, I created 2 floors of information. The ground floor places human biocultural evolution in a global context, and the first floor houses the information about local Neolithic, because the Bellary Rayalaseema region is rich in Neolithic, megalithic sites and early historic sites. So we thought that let us focus the contributions made by various scholars and the findings of these scholars in terms of our understanding of Neolithic, megalithic, early historic and so on and so forth. And now as I see that in the last 3 years, the footfall at the museum is increasing, and Saturdays and Sundays we get school children, and on other days we get college going students, including the faculty. And most exciting thing to see is biology students come to study human evolution in the museum, not in their college. So that kind of development is really satisfying, and it is catering to the needs of the people of all walks of life. And then the authorities who supported my project, they are extremely happy. They said, yes, in Bellary there was no place where we could bring our VIP visitors, and now at least we have this museum. Whenever a dignitary, whether it is a minister or a governor or any other national level IAS officer, if they have time to stay in Bellary, their leisure time is spent by visiting the museum. And a couple of years ago, the governor of Karnataka visited the museum, and likewise the former ISRO chairman came this year, and many intellectuals based in Bangalore, so they also visited the museum, and they have left very good feedback, and that is encouraging to us. And I said, yes, while I was teaching in the university, I could not meet the requirements of my student, but at least I am now meeting the requirements of much larger community, of people who are interested in our past.
थँक्यू सर.
Yes.
अजून काही
रमा हो
विचारायचं
गया.
आहे?